Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Kornhaus. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and the president of Professionals United for Parkland. I am here with an awesome trauma therapist who I've connected with through all of this. And we want to have an important conversation with you guys today about trauma and doing trauma work as a clinician and some of the stuff that we feel is important that's come up through our interactions with clinicians who've been working in the Parkland community and the surrounding areas after the shooting. So I'm going to introduce you guys. Would you like to introduce yourself? Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Tricia Youngs. I am the president of the Path to Healing, and it's really exciting to be here and be a part of this organization. I believe that this is a very special time in our history, and we as clinicians have an opportunity to come alongside people to help them navigate through this crisis that they're experiencing and really be able to come out onto the other side of it stronger than when the event happened.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's not just for the people who were there at, shall we say, ground zero at MSD, but the community at large, because the community at large has been impacted. And so we're at a special time where we want to go in and, be able to come alongside people, assist them, and do no harm.
Absolutely. Big things that you said, so much of it there. And before I get into some of the stuff you talked about, which I heard in there, traumatic growth was referenced and not doing harm, really important things. But could you just share quickly with us what your trauma training and background is, just so that we know who you are and why we should even listen to you? Just a quick snippet.
Sure. Okay, sure, absolutely. My trauma training, I've been a therapist for it seems like it's going on 20 years now. And my training, most of my trauma training has really come postgraduate. I believe that grad school prepared me to go out into the world and get trained.
Yes, I agree.
Get trained, okay? And in that training, what I was very blessed to do was to be able to put myself in front of some of our world's greatest trainers. I've trained personally extensively with Pia Melody out of the Meadows, who was the founder of really one of the pioneers in the treatment of codependence and developmental wounding with love addiction and love avoidance and substance abuse disorders. So I'm very well versed in all of those developmental wounding traumas. I've also trained with Bessel van der Kolk out at the Trauma Center in Boston and Cambridge. I've done extensive training with Deb Korn, who is an EMDRIA certified EMDR specialist who does EMDR training in complex trauma and dissociative disorder. So I've done extensive EMDR training in that area as well. I've been trained in psychodrama,
Awesome.
Trained by Daniel Amen from the Amen Institute, Herbert Benson from Harvard. I mean, just a bunch of people.
Awesome. You've got a wide range of stuff, and that's kind of what you need to be a trauma therapist, right? Lots of tools in the belt that you can pull out.
Absolutely. And I also, my first job in the field was I worked at the Sexual Assault Treatment Center down in Fort Lauderdale as a crisis counselor. So I was pretty much one of the first people that received the rape victim when they were brought in by police, and was in the exams, working with people, working with the families. That was it.
Yeah, that's an important piece you brought up too, because I think I said before, unless you've really worked with somebody immediately after a major trauma, it's kind of a different skill set that you may not have tapped into before, and intervening in a crisis situation with somebody who's acute and raw, fresh out of a traumatic situation, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing is somebody who can be acute and raw, trauma sits on everybody's nervous system differently. Everyone comes into the trauma differently. One of the things that we know is that soldiers who experience PTSD, the majority of soldiers who experience PTSD actually have pre-existing childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That predisposes them to PTSD.
Yep. And I can say that I'm finding that experientially and working particularly with the Parkland people. My clients who've rapidly recovered with a couple of sessions of EMDR don't have the history of trauma or pre-existing mental health conditions like anxiety or depression. But my people who come in who had anxiety, now they're meeting the criteria for PTSD a month later.
Right, because now they're developing like another layer, so we're starting to move into more complex trauma.
Absolutely, yeah. So, Tricia, could you quickly just define for us what is trauma? Because we all throw the word around, but I'm not sure that we all have a common definition. So, what's your definition of trauma?
Well, I think my definition of trauma would be when an individual experiences an event that is beyond the capacity for their brain to process.
Beautiful.
Right. So they don't necessarily have what it takes at that moment to process all the multiple things that are happening for them.
It sounds like a system overload.
It is a system overload.
Okay.
It is definitely a system overload, and it involves safety, physical safety, emotional safety, perceived threat. So it involves multiple things, and it involves multiple sensory not interventions, but imprints.
Yeah.
Multiple sensory imprints.
Absolutely, yeah. So can you explain briefly what happens to the body and the nervous system immediately during and after a trauma and when people are triggered again?
Well, as sophisticated as we believe we are, we really are basically very primitive species, all right? And when we experience a trauma, quite often our brain, the limbic system, gets hijacked, right? So we go into what they call a limbic hijack. Our limbic system, which is our emotional center of our brain, goes into either fight, flight, or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when we experience a trauma, we're going to go into either fight, flight, or freeze. And guess what?
What?
We don't get to decide.
Yeah.
Whether I'm getting, because people, a lot of times people always will say, well, if I was in that situation, I would have run, or I would have hit the guy, or I would have tackled the guy, or, I would have run away. We don't get to decide how our brains respond.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't.
Yeah.
Our reptilian brain, our primitive brain, decides for us.
Got it.
And whatever it decides is the best choice at that moment.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Right. So our brain is so sophisticated, it's going to decide the best choice for us available in that moment. So we go into fight, flight, or freeze, right? But also our brain, very rapid fire, is making impressions of everything that's coming at us. It's making impressions of the sights, the things that we're seeing. It's making impressions of what we're hearing. It's making impressions of the smells that we're taking in. It's making impressions of what we're tasting in the air, what we're feeling on our skin. So we're in sensory overload.
Mm-hmm.
As we're in sensory overload, there are signals being sent down to our body. And our body is making up a story, our brain's making up a story about the sensory data that's coming in, right? And quite often what happens is this sensory data gets kind of like plugged in with, let's say this is the impression, the sensory data, it gets plugged in with the negative thought and the negative emotion that are happening at that time of the event.
Mm-hmm. So the negative thought might be, I'm going to die, I'm unsafe. The negative emotion might be just total fear, panic, anxiety.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so they kind of like get fused together. It's almost like they get plugged in together, right?
Yeah.
Now, because there's too much coming at us at once, this memory doesn't get stored back in our remote memory bank. It's like, okay, that happened. It was Thursday. I'm going to file that back there.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. It typically floats around our brain, our nervous system, in a very fragmented way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And these fragments kind of float around, and they get triggered or they get opened up again when we experience, we could be walking through life and we could, all of a sudden something will happen that will brush up against one of those fragments that's floating around, and that it will open up again, and we will have, could be a visual flashback, it could be a body memory, it could be an auditory memory, it can be an olfactory memory. So
it could be those feelings, openings, those thoughts coming up.
Right. And all of a sudden there's a flooding, and we just feel like we're overwhelmed. And, trauma, the brain is amazing. I always tell my clients is like, your brain will take you on a wild ride. It'll take you from right here, right now in the present, and kind of like zoom you in and make you like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. You'll go back, you'll go forward, you'll go back and forward, back. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, people, post-trauma, a lot of times people, well, first of all, during the trauma, a lot of times in order to stay safe, your brain actually kind of like splits from your body, and you might dissociate. Mm-hmm. You might float above or numb out. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people report floating above and being able to observe what's going on. Yep. And kind of detach from it. Yep. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. What a beautiful gift our brain, or from my perspective, our God gave us.
Yeah. Let me take some of what you said and try to put it in context too, for people to, get an example. So you talked about the nervous system being activated and memories being stored in different fragments throughout the brain, so they get opened up randomly. So this would be like when a door slams, boom, and it's a reminder of maybe a loud noise, a crashing or a gunshot that happened in a shooting. Then you're triggered, right? Or it could be even being in the same classroom where the shooting occurred and having a visual of some of the items that were in front of you when you realized that your life was in danger, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Or it could be, I've heard clients saying the police lights on top of the car because when they were leaving the school, that's what they saw. And so all these little random things can become triggers.
Fire hydrant. I mean, not a fire hydrant. Seeing a fire truck.
Absolutely.
Or an ambulance.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just a lot that we can't anticipate, right?
Or, being in a classroom, hearing the lesson that was being taught, hearing that same kind of topic that was being discussed.
Yeah. Such a range of things that can come up. And when you talked about, there's something else you said in there I wanted to touch on. When you spoke about dissociation, so this would be a lot of what people report to me when they're saying, it doesn't even feel real. I felt like I was watching a movie when I was in there.
Right. That's like the derealization, like when you really, you're separated from it. Right. And so you're almost in that observer place.
Yeah. So we've got kind of good...
Yeah, so you compartmentalize and you kind of like split off from that, which is a self-protective mechanism.
Yeah, it's a good thing for the moment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then if it's not resolved, then it becomes problematic for you in your day-to-day life.
Right. So people can be walking around, maybe interacting with their friends, and they start to feel like everything feels a little funny, or they start to kind of numb out and get lost in their thoughts. These kinds of things can happen at a place where it's not helpful for it to happen.
I love that you said that. I always tell my clients, all of your emotions are appropriate. There's no such thing as an inappropriate emotion. Mm-hmm. Yet there are times when your emotions aren't necessarily so convenient.
Yeah.
When they show up, it isn't such a convenient time for them to show up.
Right. Absolutely. We're talking the same language here. So, all right. So we've got an understanding now of trauma, what happens in the body and the brain, and how memories are activated. So with this information, what would be some of the most important first steps in treating a client who's been through a major recent trauma?
I think some of the really important things to tell people is however they responded, whatever they chose to do, it was the right choice.
Yeah, don't leave them questioning everything, right?
Yeah, because people are all going to be wanting to know, but I should have, I could have, if I had just done, if I had done this, then my friend would have lived. If I had done that, if I had just not let my kid go to school that day.
Right.
My child, there might be a parent that said that their kid said, yeah, I really want to go to school today. I have a little bit of stomach ache. And as parents do, what we encourage our children to do, rightfully so, is say, no, come on, you're going to school. You're not really sick. You're going to school. Well, that parent that sent their child off to the school that day with that message, I would imagine is holding on to extreme amount of guilt and remorse.
Yeah.
Had I only been able to, if I only held Joey back or Susie, or if I let Susie go home, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, yeah. So that's one first thing. You want to make sure they feel okay with their decision with whatever happened. What's something else that's important?
And let people know that, you know what, you made the best choice available to you at the time with the information you had.
With what you knew and where you were. Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. So that's like number one. Number two, I think that it's a perpetual, repetitive repeating of the fact that right now, right here, in this moment, are you safe? Mm-hmm. And literally, I will have people look around the room, start naming objects within the room, look at their hands, look at their feet, and I'll just say, okay, look at your hands, look at your feet. Tell me, where are your hands and your feet? And they'll look at me, they'll say, like, well, they're right here, and I'll say, okay, so in this moment, where is your brain? Mm-hmm. Where are your thoughts? Well, I'm back there. In the future. What if when I go? No, bring your thoughts right back right here with your hands and your feet. Because right now, where your hands and your feet are, like all is well.
Yeah.
Are you safe?
Yeah.
Are you safe? And then I will ask people if they say, no, I'm not safe. Then we explore that and say, in that moment, what are some things that you might need to help you feel more safe right now?
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like a lot of just bringing it into the present moment. You want to connect the brain and the body with where we are right now, using the senses and what's immediately available to you.
Absolutely. And, that's known as grounding in a lot of realms. But really teaching them how to be in the here and now.
Yeah. Yeah.
How to be in the here and now. Until people can really start to become stabilized in the here and now, you can't do any real trauma processing.
Yeah. Yep. If it's been a while after the event, you can't get in there and open stuff up if people don't have skills then to close and calm down.
It's unethical to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
People want to get in there and they want to say, we got to work this out. We got to purge it. We got to do it. Yeah. If you don't have a plan and an ability and a skill to close that up, don't open it up.
Yeah, that's a really important piece there. There's so much time in the beginning. Now that like the first week or two has passed, there's some protocols that you can use for recent trauma to get in before it locks into the body in an imprint. But beside from that, once things have settled in and we're looking at PTSD, which is diagnosed 1 month out from the event and on, you've got to spend so much time, it sounds like, working on those skills of grounding and regulating the body, the brain, the emotions. Right. And the
more compromised, shall we say, a person was prior to the event, the longer you're going to have to work on doing just safety, stabilization, grounding. I mean, even if you do EMDR, you might have to spend a good deal amount of time on resourcing.
Yeah.
And doing a lot of resourcing so you don't overwhelm and flood someone unnecessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we all have our favorite go-tos to teach skills about grounding and self-regulation. At least I hope we do. If not, get some extra training. But yeah, that's a huge point. You've got to spend so much time in that space, whatever it takes. And how do you know when someone's okay? Like they've got enough skill and resource that you can maybe start to talk about what happened?
That's an interesting question. I don't know how to answer that. I mean, because I have this, I mean, I've been doing it for a real long time. So intuitively I can kind of, I mean, I can sense that intuitively. I know that. But I think that if you start to go somewhere and somebody immediately starts to have an abreaction or starts to decompensate, you need to probably step out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing is step out and zip up and just work on some more grounding. Yeah. And validate their ability to go that far. Be like, good for you. Absolutely. You did a great job.
Yeah. So lots of reinforcing the signs of progress, the courage that they have to take these steps. Mm-hmm.
Right. I think one of the challenges that clinicians have, and not just clinicians, but humans have, who have compassion, we have this desire to help people to get to the other side. And let's get there. Come on, let's do it. I know you can do this. Let's get there. Let's get there. Let's get there. We have to go at their pace, not at our desired pace for the individual.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're talking about is allowing them to have a journey of recovery, and not that there's a destination and a deadline, but that this is a journey and there's an unfolding of healing and new insights and wisdom and strength that you're going to gain all along the way.
Absolutely. And not to force the clinician's agenda upon the client.
Back to basics, right? But this is so important in trauma work.
Absolutely. And right now we are in, how do I say this? We're in an interesting age where obviously people want to stop the violence. Absolutely want to stop the violence. We do. And we want to come along and support people in their cause, all right? But we don't want to be the main event. We want to be supportive of whatever person's choice is to empower themselves, whatever their voice might be, whatever they choose to do. Some people might want to, become really active in a call for gun legislation. That's fabulous. Some people might not want that. That's fabulous. Some people might want to, there's so many different choices. It's really important that the clinician's value system doesn't superimpose this impressionable brain.
Right. So I would imagine for us to be able to do that stuff that we know is so important in therapy, to withhold our own values and to come from the client's goals and perspective, and guide them through it instead of directing them, I would imagine that we ourselves need to be very aware of what stirred up for us personally as citizens in South Florida who live nearby Parkland, as parents, as siblings, or whatever it might be, even our own traumas from the past, our own political views. We need to be super aware of what's happening there, right?
Absolutely, because we run the risk of trying to put on our own hero cape and go in and become a rescuer, if in our own family of origin we were a hero, this is a great opportunity for that hero to want to come out and just help everybody.
Yeah.
And that's not really our role. Our role is to come alongside people and allow them to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you, you mentioned something earlier about not doing harm. So through the stuff that we've talked about, what are some of the things that clinicians can do with good intentions that actually can cause harm to people who've experienced a trauma?
Things that I've heard people say, and I'm not specifically talking about this event, but just in general.
Sure.
What I've seen and observed people say is, aren't you really mad? You should be mad at them. You need to tap into your anger. Well, that might not be where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are to give permission for people to tap into their anger.
Mm-hmm. Not set an expectation. Yeah.
Not the expectation.
Yeah.
Because that might not be where they're at.
Right.
They might have profound sadness, or they might have guilt. So we're not to superimpose what we want for them to do.
Right, or what our experience is, or what the experience of most of our clients is. And that can cause harm when you do, because you're taking away their power and their ability to have their own journey, which is what they might have already experienced in the trauma.
Right, and actually when I was working at the Rape Treatment Center, it was interesting because obviously, most people want rapists to, go to jail, to be taken off the street. And obviously, that makes sense. But it was the victim that was going to have to go through that whole process to get them there. And so, you really had to honor whatever somebody's choice was, where you choose to not prosecute. That's part of taking your power back.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're making the choice. So recovery from trauma is really, so much of it is about making choices and having your choices, whatever your choice is, as long as it's not, harmful, to be supported.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of holding space for people and
Absolutely.
Being present to keep them from falling down, or when they get tripped up, to support, and stand side by side with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not everyone is going to need to have a catharsis.
So explain what you mean by that a little bit.
So sometimes people have to have a huge emotional expression,
Mm-hmm.
A catharsis. Like, catharsis is usually big and dramatic.
Yeah, major release.
Major release. Not everybody needs that. That could be quite triggering for the majority of people who were physically at the event, because they already had a huge catharsis. They already had that huge thing. So I would, as I'm thinking this through in this moment, I would be highly cautious of having, and this is me, but of having clients exposed to a lot of catharsis with other people present, because one person's process could very easily trigger another person. It could be reactivating. I don't know. That's just kind of like my general thought.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we've spoken about today has to do with the general concept of really making trauma therapy and trauma recovery about the individual, so that there's no expectation, there's no set process, there's no comparing, there's no benchmarks, right? It's about the individual, and everybody's process is different based on pre-existing conditions, their personality, and then just whatever comes up for them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's, part of what happens when we offer these services to individuals who have gone through the trauma, who have been exposed to the trauma. We don't have a psychosocial history on these people when they're walking in. And they're all like, yeah, I was there. All right. So we have to be really cautious. Just because they were there, we don't know what's underlying that.
Mm-hmm.
That once we start to work with this person, what else are we going to open up?
Yeah. What's connected to this memory?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's where, I think that it's always best to err on the side of caution. Always assume that there's a lot under there.
Yeah.
That's what I always assume, there's all sorts of stuff under here. And if there isn't, that's awesome.
Right.
Then we're in the bonus round.
Yeah.
Right. But we got to assume that there's a whole lot of stuff under the iceberg. That we're, the trauma is the tip of the iceberg. This recent event's the tip of the iceberg, but there's a potential to have a whole lot of stuff underneath.
Yeah. So we need to be cautious. We need to be aware. And I'm beginning to think, maybe some people who haven't had a ton of experience doing trauma work, maybe they're kind of feeling overwhelmed right now or questioning themselves and going, okay, but what if somebody showed up in my office and I've already been treating them? And so what would you say, just kind of a general maybe golden rule or a thing to follow to help people who have landed these kinds of cases in their laps or, maybe they encounter a situation? What would you recommend?
Supervision. Therapy of your own.
Yeah.
Really, if you don't have expertise working in trauma, that's okay. Nobody gets it. None of us came to this planet with the expertise. Okay. Yet, if you're operating out of your scope of practice, and you're not getting appropriate supervision, you need to refer that person out.
Yeah, right. So there's no shame in suddenly realizing, okay, this is more than what I thought, and these cases are actually quite different than the work that I do as a family therapist or a child therapist or
right.
couples, whatever. And so there's no shame in that. Acknowledging that's true professionalism, acknowledging where you're at, seeing if consultation and supervision will help. And if not, if it's beyond your scope, just referring out. No one's going to shame you for it, at least not here.
Right. And the other thing, that's a gift to give to the client. Going, I am going to take such good care of you. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to put you in the hands of somebody who is an expert in this area. You know why? Because you deserve that.
Yeah.
You deserve to be with somebody who's the best of the best. And like myself, I am not the person to treat OCD.
Yeah.
That's not it's not my thing.
Right.
There are some people who that's their expertise. I am not, there's a lot of things that's not my thing.
Yeah.
So, we that's how we do. We send people to get the best care that they can.
Yeah, and it needs to be that way because, you're actually, as a therapist, if you're working with somebody and it's outside of your scope, one, you can be causing harm, but two, the damage that can be done from your good intentions to try to serve them thinking there's not enough therapists or you're local or they landed with you, whatever. That's great, but you can do damage that then has to be undone. And that can kind of damage the trust in mental health care. It can damage the potential relationship with the next therapist because people are going to know, like, hey, I'm not getting better and I don't feel great about this process. And
right.
Yeah, so it's just a service to everybody and there's no shame in referring it on. And believe me, if there's somebody who needs trauma work and needs an expert, we will find a way to do it. We have access to resources to pay people. We've got awesome people doing pro bono stuff. There's always a person there. So just reach out and let us know.
Right. And I think it's very important that the whoever is facilitating the work make sure that they really take care of themselves.
Yeah, perfect. I wanted to go there next. Thank you. So, Tricia, what is vicarious trauma and what can doing trauma therapy, how can that affect you as a clinician and as a person?
Well, energetically, we as humans absorb energy, and as humans, we discharge energy as well. All right. So emotions are nothing more than energy. That's all it is.
Right.
It's just energy formed a certain way. And so as people are discharging great deals of emotion, there literally is a vibration that's happening that you may or may not feel. All right. And if you're too close to that person in proximity, you're going to absorb their energy. So, first of all, it's really important to have a good physical boundary. In other words, creating physical space between you and the person that you're working with, right? So you're not absorbing that discharged energy and then taking it on your own physical self.
Yeah, and so guys, this isn't anything weird. This is like when you walk into a room and you feel the tension, or when somebody's angry and you can kind of feel it boiling. Like, this is stuff that we all experience all the time, so it makes a lot of sense.
Right. So I'm not talking any, like, hocus pocus stuff. This is just, basic physics.
Yeah.
It's just basic physics. And the reality is any single person, first of all, who was in that building, they absorbed all of that energy that was in that building. They became containers of all of that chaos and that energy, all right? So what's going to happen is they're walking around the planet with all of these vibrations, and they're going to walk into your office, and that's going to like, come in the air of your office. So you need to just protect yourself. When I say protect yourself, contain yourself, and have blankets and have pillows for people to absorb some of that discharged energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and create for yourself a calm space. Do your own breathing, your own relaxation strategies, because their frantic energy cannot become yours, or you're going to have two people getting nowhere in a room, right?
Right. The higher they get, the lower you need to go.
Yeah.
The more they're escalating, the more breathing and self-soothing and calming and your own mantra that you have to do.
Right.
I know for myself, when somebody's discharging, when they're unpacking a horrendous story, their horrendous story, whatever it might be, I'm taking care of myself. They need to unpack the story. I don't need to hear all the details of the story. I don't need to take those in, but I can do a little EMDR, a little tapping while they're talking,
mm-hmm.
and install a nice positive mantra for myself so I'm not absorbing all that stuff.
Nice. I like that. So what's a mantra that you use?
Typically, I'm safe, all is well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm safe, all is well, all is well, all is well, that kind of thing.
Yeah. You can just tap your toes, a little something.
I just, as long as it's bilateral, a lot of times, like, I'll put my hands on my lap, and I'll just be sitting on my chair, and I'll put my hands on my lap, just like really casually, and I'll just tap
your knees, right? Yeah.
Tap my knees, and after my client's with me for a little while, I'll teach them, because I teach them these skills.
Right.
And they're like, oh, there you go. I said, that's right. I'm not carrying your crap home with me. I want to be alongside you, but I'm not going to take your crap home with me.
Yeah, we're not going to drown here together.
Right, because that's not good self-care. And so we, as clinicians, I think that we are in a beautiful place to teach people self-care.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing. What's that?
By modeling it for them.
And it's an ongoing practice for us. There are going to be times that we slip up, and it's just constantly checking in, monitoring, and then, tweaking where we need to get back to the level of wellness that we need to hold for our clients.
Right. And a lot of that has to do, too, with boundaries. With extending our, how far are our boundaries going to go in terms of practice and appointment and availability and, what we're going to show up for.
Yeah. Preventative, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because, once we burn out, it's not going to be any good.
Right. So what are some?
I guess what I want to add is that we don't want to be to be so helpful to the person in our office that when we walk out of our office, we are unavailable for our own families.
Yeah.
We don't want to leave it all at the office. So there's going to be balance.
Yeah. Yeah. Ongoing learning and finding that balance and maintaining that balance depending on how many clients and what they're bringing and all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if you have a caseload of all trauma clients, you're going to be crispy.
Yeah. So, Tricia, what are some of the signs people can look for to know when it's starting to get to them? When they need to pull back and set boundaries, or they need to step up their self-care? What do you look for?
Exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
Being hypercritical, being very negative.
Irritable.
Going one up. Starting to become judgmental, practicing in an exorbitant amount of dark humor, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So,
and really, just feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of what you said there, it sounds kind of like becoming a little numb to it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then what about changes in sleeping patterns, eating patterns, anything like that to look for?
Absolutely. If you're starting to dream about your clients, then that's a problem. If you start to have if you start not wanting to get up and go to work, if you start feeling like, oh, God, I got to go and hear more stories, that means you're burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah. And the point of this conversation is not to judge anybody for where you are, for what's going on, but to help raise awareness and to, like we do for our trauma clients, give ourselves and each other permission to do what we need to do to take care of ourselves, whether it's referring out or stepping up our self-care or setting different boundaries. That's what this is about. There's no judgment. If you're noticing, oh yeah, that's me, or oh yeah, that's me. Just like there's no judgment for a PTSD client who goes, oh my gosh, yes, I have that criteria and that symptom. And no, it's not about judgment. It's about identifying what's happening so that we can work on it.
Absolutely. And if you notice yourself drinking more, that's a symptom.
Absolutely.
That's a symptom of burnout, of vicarious trauma. That's a symptom of vicarious trauma. Drinking more, eating more, restricting, whatever your little proclivities are.
Yeah.
Those are all things that you need to monitor.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I think that is exciting about this time in our lives is the fact that there are so many people who are wanting to get more information and more skills on how to really treat trauma. So that's a beautiful thing. I actually have several trauma trainings that are coming out in the next, several months, extensive trauma trainings, because I think that so many people who are therapists, trauma shows up in everybody's office all the time. And a lot of times people will say, they'll ask the client, well, are you bothered by that? They're like, no, I'm good with that now. I'm okay, yeah. I'm just here to talk about my marriage. Yet, a lot of times what's the underneath stuff again that's going on in the marriage is about the trauma that happened a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. I can't tell you how many people I talk to who, once you talk to them, find out that, wow, that stuff that happened at 9/11 was never really resolved.
Mm-hmm.
But here it is. It's in your living room. It's in your marriage, through your reactions.
Yeah.
And I think the same is going to be true for the shooting that happened in our community. 10 years from now. 10 years from now, that's all going to show up in our offices and it's going to have a different suit on.
Yeah.
It's going to show up differently, but it's going to be the same thing.
Yeah. A drinking problem, infidelity, an estranged sibling. These are the different dynamics that can pop up, like you said, over time after trauma has locked in and it's not addressed. So you're right. I think that is a beautiful thing that people are becoming more aware, even as clinicians and in the community, of what trauma is and the importance of knowing how to respond and help people through recovering from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Tricia, is there anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to share while we have this opportunity?
I think that part of what I like the message to be to the client is, you're going to get through this, and you don't have to get through it alone.
Yeah.
And it's a lot better if you don't try to go through it alone.
Yeah.
You need a guide that can be with you. And you also need your support people, your tribe of people that are going to be able to pull you along.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those kids and those teachers, they have a trauma bond. They will be linked forever.
And even the alumni who weren't there, right? I've seen them be part of this network of trauma. Mm-hmm.
The alumni, the families, they're all going to have trauma bonds. And trauma bonds are very strong, powerful, potentially beautiful things. And they, in the long term, can be really complicated for your relationships. Yes. I've seen this in romantic relationships particularly. Absolutely. Work relationships, romantic relationships. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I think that's enough for today. It was a lot of information, guys, but I hope that it was helpful. Thank you so much, Tricia, for your time in doing this.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. And if you guys have any questions about anything that we've talked about, you can feel free to comment wherever this is posted, or you can shoot an email to us and we'd be happy to get back to you. Tricia, I'll post your contact information as well if people have specific questions about what you discussed or your trainings coming up, so that they can reach out to you if that's okay.
That would be fabulous.
Okay, awesome.
I am so proud to be part of this community.
Yeah.
Truly, this is this is an amazing time. We can really, I feel like we're really doing an amazing. It's just an amazing slice of time. Really doing God's work.
It is, and that's the kind of perspective that we can bring to all of this. Is all of the growth and all of the opportunity and all of the strength that comes out of people and their hearts, and it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
So this can be an unstoppable wave of change.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's it for us. Thank you again, Tricia. And
thank you.
You're welcome. We'll talk to you guys later.
And Melissa, thanks for everything that you're doing for this. I appreciate it immensely.
Yes, you're welcome. It's, when it's on your heart, you follow.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right.
Take care. Bye.